Yes.
We can resume. This is where we left off last week. Slide of Father Martin. If you ever run into one of his books at the library, particularly The Decline and Fall of the Roman Church. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Church.
Is that on our reference list?
I think so. Because it's eminently readable. He has the power to, he has the gift of writing a historical fiction and take the basic facts and really embellish them. And he can do that very well. The book is, I think it may be out of print as far as buying it brand new. But you may get it in Amazon or the local library might have it. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Church. It's a series of vignettes.
The decline and fall, that's kind of the same.
From about 20 books at critical periods of the history with other non-historical figures coming in, making it very, very. All right, so following this, we
Yes,
need to.
you can still get it.
It is good. All right, good to know. So the medieval papacy existed in an environment when the influence of the Roman Empire was increasing and the influence of other Western powers like France, England, and Spain was increasing. So the decline of one was accompanied by the rise of the others. The key thing to remember about these dark periods is that the papacy always pursued its best interest. Very selfish. Security, defense, and wealth. What did they exchange that for? Legitimacy, recognition, and the like. So that was the trade-off. But throughout all these years, this is what the papacy strives for. Let's talk about the College of Cardinals. Excuse me. The College of Cardinals and Conclave. Please understand this, which has taken a lot of people time to understand what cardinals are. Cardinals represent the clergy of the Diocese of Rome. Period. That's who they represent. The cardinal in New York, he represents the clergy of the Diocese of New York. The cardinal of Mexico City represents the clergy of the Diocese of Rome. They all are attached to a diocese or a church or a parish in Rome. All right, that has to be made perfectly clear.
Let me say that again. So
Sorry.
the Cardinal of New York.
Yes, is attached to a parish or church or other parish in Rome.
In Rome, not in
No, not in.
Okay.
Oh, he has authority in New York, but he is attached to the College of Cardinals through a
Gotcha.
parish there.
Okay.
It's a nominal appointment. They might get $50 a month for being associated with that parish. But every one of them is associated with a parish or a church or a diocese in Rome. So they represent the clergy in Rome.
But what is the congregation considered? That's like also
belongs to the diocese of Rome?
Okay, please speak up. What is
I mean, the congregation, let's say in New York,
Yeah.
how are they considered, like congregation in New York or part of the diocese of Rome?
He has administrative responsibilities over the Diocese of New York.
But,
It's just a name, a nomination,
okay,
a name only with the other place in Rome. The key thing is to remember, they represent the clergy of the Diocese of Rome. And originally, they just performed the administrative and charitable work, made up the court of the Pope. Pope was a king. Remember, he had those territories? He was a monarch of those territories. He was no mere administrator. So,
but today, the diocese of Rome is not the same with the policy,
No, it's-
totally different.
it's much larger, but still, every cardinal represents the clergy of a diocese in Rome.
Not,
Has nothing to do with it. It's an interesting concept
yeah,
to develop, and this is why a lot of people really do not understand the cardinals and the function of the cardinals. So they advise the Pope and sit in consistory, that is a reunion of the popes. Originally, there were 42 cardinals. And these include 7 suburban cardinal bishops, 7 regional deacons, not bishops, not even priests, deacons, and 28 cardinal priests, each assigned to a specific church or parish in mind. For example, the Archbishop in Washington, the one who got defrocked for chasing little boys, he was assigned the Church of St. Pietro in Vincoli. That's where the most, like Michelangelo's most is. And you pay €0.50 to have 30 seconds of light so you can see the Moses and then the lights go off. Yes?
So in that role in Rome, they're just, that's just the title?
It's just a title.
They're not expected to be going there or doing anything or ruling?
They have a coadjutor bishop or an auxiliary bishop. Somebody else running the day-to-day business of the diocese or the parish or whatever. It's just a link to the clergy of Rome.
but if that is true, like who would appoint, let's say, the Cardinal of New York, the diocese of Rome? Besides who?
Yes. Yes. So originally there were that many cardinals. Now the cardinals are almost 200.
How do that? They create new churches or parishes
No,
in Rome to be able to associate and create new cardinals?
they,
That was before.
they have enough churches in Rome and in the vicinity.
To just keep it growing.
Yeah, keep
Well,
going.
they don't keep it growing though. I don't think. It's usually about a fixed amount, isn't it? The number of cardinals.
I'm so sorry.
The number of cardinals is relatively fixed.
Yes.
So if they die off,
It was gone from 42 to 200.
Right.
There was some growth along the way.
right, it's like the Senate,
Yeah.
right?
But now they've capped it. Okay.
But it grew because you get new territories. You get America and you get Latin America.
So the Bishop of Rome, as we said before, was elected by the clergy and the faithful, and usually confirmed by the emperor. Rarely it was appointed by the emperor. Finally, in 1059, Pope Nicholas decided that only cardinal bishops, no deacons, no priests, could vote in an election. So that decreased the number of cardinal bishops to about 10 at that time. And those were the ones that decided who the Bishop of Rome would be. And the other thing that was determined at this time, over 1,000 years ago, was that 2/3 of all votes were necessary for election. That created a lot of problems. Because you know how difficult it is to get 2/3 majority on anything?
You see that, Lauren?
Even in HOA can't do that.
Anything still is. So what happened was that noble Roman families and kings of Europe tried to influence appointments and elections. The kings of Europe had the ability to veto a candidate. So whenever a pope died, they issued a letter or a message. Everybody is fine except this fellow. The king of Austria says, this one not. King of England said, this one is blackballed. So that's how they exercise that power.
Question.
Necessarily, small groups and factions developed. And we ended up with lengthy processes, deliberations, and compromise candidates. Whenever people compromise, they usually give up their best options. So whenever there is a compromise, the end result is at best second best. Yes, please.
Were they using ecclesiastical ballot then, or when did that start?
Were they using,
Ecclesiastical ballot, where the first vote, and I think the College of Cardinals uses this today, is my understanding. The first vote, there's no nomination. You vote for anybody, who put your own name.
yeah,
Then they winnow it down and take out the ones that only got a few ballots, and you can only vote for these the next time, and each time they winnow it down. And
there may be something like that.
they use that today. And I know our church, which is not Catholic, uses that to elect bishops.
So in other words, only the leaders in the votes get to appear in the next vote.
Finally come down to the last two, and then we're gonna get a majority. I don't know if we're gonna get it 2/3. Our present bishop, this is the Lutheran Synod of Delaware, Maryland. Our present bishop was first elected by one vote.
That's all it takes.
It was close.
That's all
I
it takes.
remember that.
Oh, it's one vote difference, though.
So whenever a strong pope was elected, there was always conflict. Because the losing party was always sorry that it happened.
They actually had groups or party titles, within these bishops.
At that time, there were families.
So
There
there
were
were,
families and countries. The French, the Germans, the Colonna families, rather than the parties. So in 1216, when the Pope died in Perugia, the citizens of Perugia, in order to accelerate the process, they locked the cardinals in a room until they elected the Pope. Then when Gregory IX died in Rome, 10 cardinals were locked for 60 days with no food, wine, or water until they elected Celestine IV. And Celestine IV died before he could be consecrated. Oh, thinking that this would happen again, the cardinals escaped and fled Rome. And they were not going to put up with 2 more months of no food and particularly no wine. God forbid. So 2 years went by without a pope.
Oh, really?
2 years. There's worse to come.
How did they make decisions?
They finally elected an Innocent IV who died in Naples 11 years later. Now, where the Pope died, that's where the next conclave met.
Yes.
If it was in Perugia, they met in Perugia. In Naples, Avignon, in Avignon. Okay, that was the understanding. It was not written anywhere. That was the general understanding.
But he died in Naples because they fled Rome and then he never went back to Rome.
I don't know why he went to Naples. Maybe he wanted some better food or something.
But that the cardinals wanted to escape Naples, so all the cardinals actually met.
Yeah, the cardinals
in
go to the
Naples.
Pope,
Yeah,
and they have to bury the Pope too, so the cardinals are all there. It makes sense.
yeah.
They're all here, we might as well stay here and try to elect the next Pope. So they wanted to escape Naples, but now they were locked into a room for 2 days until they elected a new Pope. 2 days only, they were smart. Later on, the Pope died in the turbo, and there were 18 cardinals for the election. 11 were supported by the Holy Roman Emperor, German Emperor. 7 were loyal to the King of France. So none of them had a 2/3 majority. So they voted and voted and voted and then voted some more. And for 33 months, almost 3 years, they kept on voting and kept on voting and still no.
Was there any retribution for the ones that didn't vote? You know, like the 18 cardinals
No,
or 11 that were supported by the Holy.
they needed 12. They needed 12. So 11 was not 12. They were supported by the Holy Roman Emperor and 7 loyal to the King of France. These wanted a German or an Italian emperor, Pope, and these wanted a French Pope.
Or was there any interplay or and retribution or threats for the ones that were not going for either side?
Oh, they called each other names and they threatened each other with all kinds of
I'm surprised that he didn't.
but
But at the same time, every cardinal was part of the royal
Yeah.
table.
so
The
Question. You said there were 42.
originally,
Okay, so and how come in some of these there's only 11? Why didn't the other guys?
there were 42 original cardinals.
Yes.
And then they took away the deacons and the priests, and only the cardinal bishops could vote.
So there was only 18 then.
There were only 18 by then. Now, the emperor brought his armies, the king arrived with his armies. There was fighting, some soldiers got killed. It was miserable. 33 months. So the citizens of Viterbo finally put the cardinals in a room, locked them up,
Nailed the doors.
nailed the doors. That's why conclave rather means nail. They nailed the doors and took the roof off. And apparently this is the room that exists to this day where they met to expose them to the elements.
Nowadays, they are negotiating off.
Yeah.
Each country.
So that finally worked. So they elected Gregory the Tenth, and Gregory the Tenth was an interesting man. He immediately called a council in Lyon, and he laid down the conditions for the election of the Pope with very specific details. And what Gregory the Tenth did is basically what is done now. Very, very much the same. The numbers may be different because of the growth and the like, but this is the process was set in the 13th century. So Gregory also achieved a reunification of the Latin and Eastern churches. You may remember how this happened several times before, that the Eastern Church and the Roman Church would get together. They say, okay, we'll believe what you believe. We'll go along to get along. But then the people of the East will not accept terms. The terms were not accepted by the clergy or the faithful.
What did that mean that he put them on interdict?
I'm sorry.
Go back
He proclaims from there.
on the bottom one,
Yeah,
the Florence on interdict.
yeah, and there were political struggles that I was not going to mention.
It's interdict.
Yeah. There were,
I don't know.
remember, Rome was a city state, and Florence was a very combative city. Remember how Dante he was exiled from Florence. So in one of the struggles between Gregory and the Medici, he decided to put Florence on interdict. Interdict is the pits. That's when the Catholic Church says no confession, no sacraments, no baptism, no last rites, no conversation, no prayer, no absolution. You die in sin, you go to hell. So that's, and there's a legend that the Pope once had to travel through Florence and stay in Florence overnight. And he said, fine, I lift up the interdict, walk into the city, stay, have
And then put
dinner at Cavallini in there in Piazza del Popolo, and left Rome the next morning. Interdict is on again. So he lifted the interdict for himself just for that period of time when he was in the city. That's a legend, and it may very well have occurred.
How long did this interdict last?
Pardon?
How long did this interdict last?
Until they made peace with each other.
I mean, how many years was that roughly, do you know?
It varied. Oh, many cities were put on interdict.
Yeah, but then,
Sometimes it was a week, sometimes it was months.
It's like the city's been excommunicated.
yes.
Maybe temporarily were outside of the church. The zest or the desire for reform was always there. People were looking forward to the kingdom of the spirit, the triumph over the material things. And great expectations were present after the death of the Pope, Nicholas IV, at the end of the 13th century. There were 13 cardinals for that conclave. The Orsini and the Colonnas, those were two very powerful families in Rome. Those loyal to the King of Naples, and two French cardinals who were out for themselves. They were against everybody. So for 2 years, there were no popes because they could not agree on anybody. Eventually, like in any agreement, they gave up their best candidates and they decided on a very inferior candidate. This man, Peter Morone. No one would speak ill of him, and they all thought that they could manipulate him. He was a hermit. He lived in a monastery somewhere up the mountain. And it was a very holy man. To give him the news, a large delegation was sent with bishops, archbishops, princes, all kinds of important people went up the mountain to visit Peter Morone and bring him down as Pope. This was, once again, the kingdom of the Spirit, paradise on earth. The time has come. Peter will do it. He took the name of Celestine V. He was not a politician. He was not a judge. He was not a diplomat. He did not know all those things. He was just a very holy man, woefully inept to be Pope. He did not like intrigue or plotting. And after 5 months, he went around and said, "Hey, I'd like to resign. Can I resign? May I resign being Pope?" Nobody had ever resigned before him. A few had been killed, but very few had resigned. So he finally resigned after 5 months, and Dante placed him in the Inferno for missing the opportunity to reform the church. That was the excuse. Cardinal Gaetani was the one who had said to the Pope, "Yeah, you can resign. I'm second in command, but yeah, you go ahead and resign. Sure, why not?" Once he became Pope, Gaetani put Celestine in protected custody or house arrest. He was afraid that he would become an anti-pope. Boniface was a canon lawyer. He was arrogant, assertive, confrontational. He was a strong pope, no question about it. He could deal with the others. He reorganized canon law, moved the papacy back to Rome from Naples, founded the university, Sapienza University, organized a jubilee. In short, he was the force behind intense ecclesiastical and political activity. He was a very active pope. Now things get interesting. Boniface, the very strong, active pope, gets into a pissing match with King Philip IV, Philip the Fair. Philip the Fair of France was taxing the clergy in order to underwrite his wars with England. So he needed money. So he taxed the clergy that would get 10% of everybody's income or everybody's profit. That was the tithe. So he issues this bull or this letter forbidding the clergy from paying taxes on church property. And Philip the Fair comes back forbidding the export of gold and other valuables. In other words, he got him where it hurt. He also expelled foreign merchants from France. So they are angry with each other, at a distance, but angry with each other. Well, Boniface had also made some enemies in Rome, particularly the Colonnas. This is their family logo, family seal. You can see the column there in the middle. That's why the family was called the Colonnas, which means column in Italian or Latin. They were a powerful family that really had no love lost for the Pope. In 1297, a convoy carrying gold from other parts of Europe was hijacked by the Colonna family. In other words, all the wealth was stolen from that convoy. The Pope retaliated by deposing and excommunicating 2 cardinals from the Colonna family who fled to France and raising Palestrina. Palestrina was the family town. So not only did they burn everything in town except the cathedral, they also went back and salted the fields to render them sterile. So those fields would not produce anything for generations. He knew how to retaliate, didn't he? No question about it. The cathedral was not touched.
It started a long time ago, yeah.
But excuse me, at that point, they already had their own army, like the Papal State.
Negative.
Did the Papal State at that point, or the Pope, had already its own army?
No, very little army.
So they use, Rome,
Yeah, somebody else, there was a small police force in Rome and, they were under the protection, either the empire or
or the
French.
for a kingdom.
Yeah. or the, kingdom of Naples.
Okay, thank you.
So the problem doesn't stop there. The bishop of, the bishop of Amiens was arrested, charged, and tried for heresy and treason by the king. Whether he was innocent or not is really not very well known. In any event, there was a conflict there with the bishop of Amiens. The king demanded his degradation. The States General in France supported the king, but Boniface, the Pope, called a synod in Rome. And the synod made it very clear in this unum sanctum, one holy, that the Roman bishop had power over the king. That was the assertion of the synod in Rome, that the Roman bishop, the Pope, had power, had civic power over the king. Well, that didn't please the king very much. So he was ready to excommunicate the king and drew up a document while he was at the town of Anagni, which is a beautiful little medieval town outside Rome, up in the mountains, where it's nice and cool in the summer. So they hated each other. Philip called for a general council to depose the Pope, and the Pope was ready to excommunicate him. And they made no bones about it. Everybody knew that they hated each other's guts. Well, on September 3rd, 1303, 2,000 mercenaries, led by William of Nogaret, a Frenchman, and Chiara Colonna. That name sounds familiar? The Colonna? Chiara means handsome. Chiara Colonna assaulted and arrested the Pope Anagni. And legend has it that Chiara Colonna slapped the Pope with his gloves on the face and was about to kill him with his sword when Nogaret prevented him from doing so. Here is Chiara Colonna with his sword pulled out, and here's William of Nogaret preventing him from killing the Pope. So there was no question that the assault with 2,000 mercenaries was either ordered or approved or agreed to by the Colonnas and by Philip the Fair, the King of France, trying to assassinate the Bishop of Rome. Here is Chiara Colonna again, with in the process of slapping the Pope on the face with his gloves. But the citizens learned of the attack and they rescued the Pope. He died in Rome several weeks later. What happened was that the public, the papacy, everybody realized how vulnerable the papacy was because it had no protection. How very, very vulnerable they were and how much hate there was, not only between the King of France and the papacy, but also between the powerful families of Rome and the papacy. So this was something that was going to weigh very heavily on them for many years. Pope was not safe in Rome. the Pope was not safe in Rome. The next Pope, Bertrand de Gaulle, who was the Archbishop of Bordeaux in western France, where they make great wine, was elected almost 1 year after the death of Benedict XI. Bertrand de Gaulle was a good Frenchman. He went over to the king in Paris, brought him some good wine from Bordeaux, sat down, broke a couple bottles, and said, "Look, king, we need to make peace. This can't go on. We can't be fighting each other. I can't fight you and the Colonnas at the same time. We have to agree to this, to something, because this power struggle cannot go on. It's not good for me. It's not good for the people. It's not good for the church. It's not good for you. So let's make peace. You want revenue? Fine, we'll give you money. You want power? Fine, we'll give you some power. I'll agree to just about anything, but we need to stop this power struggle." So he met with Philip and agreed to all his demands. He could not guarantee a safe return to Rome, because Rome was not under the care of the king of France. Rome was under the authority of the Roman families. So the Pope was not safe returning to Rome. Therefore, he and his bishops and archbishops and cardinals, they went to Lyon. Can eat well there, but not forever. And then when he got tired, he went to Cluny, which is fine for several days. Bordeaux, similarly, Poitiers, and then they ended up in Avignon. And now we're talking. Any of you ever been to Avignon? No. Well, it's, number one, it was safe. The city was the property of the King of Naples, but had lovely weather, fertile soil, superb wine to this day, plentiful food, defensible, because the Rhone River here is a very large river. It's like the Potomac. It's a very, very large river. And it has enormous flow, north to south. So with any flotilla of ships that depended on wind power was not going to go upriver. So only flotillas coming from the north could pass through Avignon. In that sense, it was very, very defensive. And the other thing was that not only was Rome unsafe, Rome was impossible, particularly in the summertime. There was, the city was in shambles, malaria, political factions, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines fighting each other or fighting themselves. The Tiber flooded every year. But Rome was not the beautiful city that it is now. This is going to come pretty soon, but it was not. So there was no incentive to return to Rome. Tell you personally, I would not have walked back to Rome. The way it was and the way Avignon was, no way. Avignon was heaven on earth for the popes that needed some stability. The attempts on the Pope's life really weighed heavily on them. They did not want to put themselves through that episode again. So the importance of that event cannot be overemphasized.
Did King Charles protect them there?
Yeah,
So,
the Cape
so that was part of the.
certainly protected them, and it was safe because it was across the river was the kingdom of France. So there was yet another kingdom that would protect him. And he had made peace with the king of France too. So Pope Clement was the first one of the popes to reside in Avignon. He straightened things out, made payments to Philip the Fair, reinstated the cardinals, and of course, Dante placed him in the Inferno too. In 1307, on Friday, October 13th, Friday the 13th, that's the origin of that myth.
Oh, yeah.
The offices and warehouses of the Knights Templar were raided by forces of both the papacy and Philip III. The Knights Templar had become very powerful. They had begun with the Crusades in the 11th century and had become the first international corporation, so to speak. If a knight was traveling from, say, from Venice to the Middle East, to Istanbul, well, he could deposit his wealth with an agent in Venice, get a receipt, and when he got to Istanbul, he could cash in that receipt. Just like a traveler's check or a cashier's check. For a fee. There was always a fee. The Knights Templar had also lent money to Philip the Fair to pursue his wars on England. And Philip the Fair was really not too keen on paying his debts, which is not unusual, even to this day and age. We see people who do not want to pay their debts or their loans. So the king may have thought that by eliminating the Knights Templar, he could erase those loans, and probably did, because eventually the all assets of the Knights Templar were transferred to the Knights of Malta that were under the influence of the king and the papacy. A lot of intrigue there.
So, Raymond, what was the relationship of the Knights of Templar to the church at the beginning? Weren't they an offshoot? Were they always mercenaries that the kings hired?
France was Catholic. France was very, very Christian.
Okay.
And the other part of your question was?
Well, who were they most associated with?
The Knights Templar.
Yeah, the monarchy or the church?
The Knights Templar, they were on their own.
So whoever would pay for them.
They were on their own.
So
Yeah, they were out for themselves. No question.
the first mercenaries.
Yeah. So in these some of the popes in Avignon, John the 22nd was the Midas of Avignon because the wealth of the church invested the wealth very, very well. Benedict the 12th was a shy, pious man who decided, we need to have some headquarters here. So decided to build the Palace of the Popes, which is still in superb condition. Certainly worth a visit. Clement VI was the one that was really the hedonist. He was all for pleasure. He said, God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it. And he certainly enjoyed it. He was extravagant, he was worldly, he was into pleasure. He threw great parties, great ambassadors, lived very well, high on the hog. Innocent VI was somewhat more austere. But it was Clement VI, the one who outdid them all. and the one that was criticized the most. Urban V was a devout man, a good administrator, and quite ethical. He actually went back to Rome for about 2 years, but had to go back to Avignon because it was not safe for him to be home. The families were too powerful. Now, throughout all these years in Avignon, and this is something a lot of people do not realize, the popes were in continuous communication with the people in Rome. They continued to be bishops of Rome. They were absent from Rome, but they continued to supervise, they continued to delegate, they continued to discuss, they continued to nominate, they continued to perform their duties as bishops of Rome. It's not that they were out there in Avignon having a good time. No, they were working. They were working as bishops of Rome in Avignon. They sent ambassadors back and forth almost every week, and they stayed in touch with the locals of Rome. Right? That's something to keep in mind. They did meet their responsibilities as bishops of Rome all this time. Finally, Gregory XI returned to Rome, but mercenaries from the families overran the papal estates. He was the one, when he got to Rome, he went to Rome and went to enter the Lateran Palace, where the bishops of Rome had always lived, found that the palace had burnt down. I can't stay at the Lateran Palace. So he said, oh, okay, fine, let's go to the Vatican. And that's how the leadership of the papacy moved to the Vatican.
Was the Vatican a state at the time or a geographic thing, or was it what was the Vatican at that point?
The Vatican was Vatican Hill.
Or was just geography or location?
It was the Rome, Vatican Hill, or the old St. Peter's Basilica. The popes lived and used to live before that in the Lateran Palace in downtown Rome, which was also an ancient basilica, but was part of the gift of Constantine. So they had lots of property. So it's not one place that went to the other. Remember that the Cathedral of Rome is the Lateran Basilica, not the Vatican. The Vatican is not the Cathedral of Rome. The Cathedral of Rome is the Lateran Basilica. So he died in Anagni, Gregory the 11th. He was the one who was visited by Catherine of Siena. Do you remember those stories about Catherine of Siena?
Yeah, so now it's Medici.
Pardon?
It's a Medici time and Caterina of Siena.
I am so sorry.
That's okay, don't worry.
My apologies.
No,
My
no, no,
hearing
I
is-
said, you said the Medici time and Caterina of Siena, or no? I'll figure it out myself.
My apologies. I am so sorry. It's mostly my fault and then the fan, but mostly my fault. Catherine of Siena was a woman who did not really belong to a religious order, but really influenced politics, literature, and many things in Italy during the 14th century. She was an unusual character. She had visions, which some people would say were hallucinations. He had stigmata, that is the wounds of Christ on the cross on her hands and legs and went, but which those stigmata only she could see. She apparently worked miracles. She fasted and fasted and fasted until she died at age 33. In modern times, people would have had major concerns about her sanity. All right. But nevertheless, at that time, she was able to meet with the Pope in Avignon and told the Pope in so many words, you better return to Rome. Rome is where you belong. The other thing we have to consider is what is the influence of a woman in the 14th century, particularly telling the Pope that you need to return to Rome. Chances are that they gave her an opportunity to be heard and then she was disregarded because the move was already there. The move was always there. The popes always wanted to return to Rome. They were just waiting for the right political moment. So the move originally to Avignon was never planned. It just occurred. They just felt there because they felt safe, because it was fine, it was good. There was Black Death in Rome, an unstable political situation. The popes were French under the influence of the Kingdom of France. And the outrage at Anagni, it really weighed very, very heavily on the papacy. We really need to understand how important this outrage at Anagni was to the medieval papacy. The popes did not want to find themselves so vulnerable again. They built what they needed to build to function and were able administrators. They really made a lot of money for the church at that time. And they did what they felt they had to do to preserve their lives and the papacy. So even in the midst of all this crisis, the popes, even though they were not perfect, they were strong enough to keep the papacy alive.
Popes, is there evidence that monies that came to the church ended up in the pockets of the Pope and their own personal wealth?
The popes that came into the church,
Well, the popes that were there,
right,
you know, I mean, there's lots of money flowing into the church
right.
from different venues. Did the popes ever line their own pockets with this money and create their own personal wealth?
Many of them were wealthy to begin with. Many of them were wealthy to begin with, and they engineered things so that their heirs would become pope. As popes, they were kings, and they had everything they wanted and more. So they did not need anything that money could buy. They had everything, and then some. Most of the money that the church received still went to the diocese. It's the diocese that have the money, certainly not the parishes. The parishes are generally poor, as we will see when we discuss France and the French Revolution. So most of the money is in the diocese. There's always been a rumor that most of the real estate in downtown Minneapolis belongs to the diocese of Minneapolis. And a few years ago, probably about 30 years ago, there were revelations of the wealth of the Archdiocese of San Juan. And that was, the details were very, very rapidly welched. But apparently they were the diocese was very, very wealthy.
Does a certain percentage of the diocese wealth go to Rome?
But the other thing that happens with wealth is that they have corporations, they have sub-corporations, they're able to hide all this wealth under a mountain of legalities. So it's very difficult to find out what they really have or not have. But yes, some of them profited personally by becoming pope. You became very, very wealthy, and you helped your family get wealthy by appointing them cardinals and bishops and archbishops. So that's what they did. And then Gregory the 11th died in 1378 in Rome, and 16 cardinals, mostly French, met in Rome for the conclave. This is where the politics get really thick, but interesting. There were Roman mobs demanding an Italian or Roman pope. They had had a pope in Avignon, a French pope, for over 70 years. Of course they were angry. We want a Roman pope. We want an Italian pope. We don't want no more French popes. So they eventually elected Bartolomeo Prignano, who was Archbishop of Bari. Bari is a city at the very south of Italy, way in the Adriatic. He was not a cardinal, but he had been like a diplomat in Avignon. He had traveled. He had been one of those messengers that went back and forth between Avignon and Rome. In other words, he was known to the cardinals. He was known in the church. And he was a polished man, an able administrator. He was recognized as, yeah, this is a good guy. He took the name of Urban VI. Urban was anything but Urban. Urban, when he became pope, changed his personality 100%. He became irascible, angry, verbally abusive, erratic, unpredictable. He tore the French cardinals apart. One of the first things he said to them, you are not going to have any more 7-course lunches. We're cutting them back to 3-course lunches. And for that reason, the French cardinals went up in arms. We can't put up with this guy. So the French cardinals assembled in Anagni after reforms were initiated and invited the Pope to come join them in Anagni. Yeah, sure, right away. Yeah. The Pope would not go because he was afraid that they were going to terminate him. They were going to put him 6 feet under. Instead, he sent 3 Italian cardinals, one after the other, go to Anagni and see what they want. And each one of them was offered the papacy if they changed their allegiance. Finally, the cardinal said, we've had enough of this. We are going to declare Urban VI invalid. And they elected Robert of Geneva as Pope Clement VII. In other words, the same group that had elected Urban deposed him, which was unheard of. And the same group elected Robert of Geneva as the new Pope. Yes, exactly. This was the Great Western Schism, the great split, a political split in Christendom. 2 popes, both elected by the same group of cardinals. There was no doctrinal issue, no conflict with the emperor, no invasion. This was all over power. One excommunicated the other, and the other excommunicated the one. They needed new cardinals, so both of them created their own court. Both of them created their own cardinals. They had their own administrators. One was in Rome and the other one is in Avignon. There was chaos, upheaval, confusion, and disarray. Cities like Paris, they would say, we're too close. Where are we going to send our contribution to the church? Wait, we need a new archbishop in Provence. Who's going to name him? Well, two people would show up. I'm the new archbishop from Rome. I'm the new archbishop from Avignon. Can you see the confusion and the chaos? And neither of them would give ground. This was the Great Western Schism. So different countries aligned with different obediences. So there was the Roman obedience, the ones who supported the Bishop of Rome, Urban, and the Avignon obedience, the ones who supported the Archbishop or the Pope in Avignon. Urban was supported by most of Germany, most of Italy, England, Portugal, Poland, and Scandinavia. On the other hand, Clement VII was endorsed by France, which was the largest country in Europe at that time, Castile, Aragon, and Navarre and Scotland in modern day Spain. Both parties really kicked each other out of the church. When one pope died, the other, please begged the other one not to elect another pope, but they did. The emperor and the kings pleaded for resolution. Both sides said, okay, I'll abdicate if you resign first. Sure. Yeah. Let me sell you a bridge. So they were chased out of Rome by force and out of Avignon. They arranged finally, I don't know how they did it, they arranged for a meeting in Savona in northern Italy. Let's meet like good Christians and work this out. Okay, we'll meet there. Set the date. They said, let's go. So all set, all set. Either side showed up out of fear that it was an ambush. So it didn't work out, nothing at all. Finally, in the year 1408, that is 30 years after they split, a number of cardinals from both obediences got into contact with each other and said, maybe we can meet and arrive at a solution. Let's bring our kings and princes. Let's bring our administrators and our dukes. See if we can work something out. So they met in Pisa. This was supposed to be an ecumenical council. Well, an ecumenical council has to be called by the Pope. The cardinals cannot call an ecumenical council. So it was illegal from the get-go. So what does the people in Pisa do? They depose both popes. Both the Pope in Avignon and the Pope in Rome. And they elect a third Pope, Alexander V. Now we have one Pope and two anti-popes. Three people claiming the same position. Of course, Alexander has to name his own cardinals, his own administration, his own court. So there are now three groups in competition with each other.
Sounds like something on the playground when kids are playing kickball or something. You're the captain. No, you.
Yeah.
And this was in medieval Europe.
Wow, and grown-ups.
So these are the timelines. The middle is the Rome obedience. This is the top is the Avignon obedience. And the bottom is the peace of obedience. Clement the seventh died, and then it was followed by Benedict the 13th. Benedict the 13th was a Spaniard. Pedro de Luna. Pedro de Luna eventually escaped to Peñíscola, which is just outside Barcelona, where he lived up in a castle with two cardinals for the rest of his life. Of course, expelling everybody from the church and issuing all kinds of directives which everybody ignored. So Benedict the 13th, Pedro de Luna, is really a pitiable character. This was probably the most legitimate line, the Roman obedience. And the peace of obedience after Alexander V elected one of the most interesting characters of this whole episode, John the 23rd. Not the little round man that we knew as Pope John, or now St. John the 23rd, but the original Pope or anti-Pope, John the 23rd. John the 23rd, Baldassare Costa. Baldassare Costa was a piece of work. Baldassare Costa was originally a pirate.
No.
He was a profiteer. Then he decided to go to law school. He got a degree in law from Bologna University. So he was not dumb. And he was not afraid of things. He was powerful. Then he went into the church, became a priest, probably paid to become a bishop, and then a cardinal, and then he got elected by the Pisa cardinals, Pope or anti-Pope John the 23rd. Personally, I like John the 23rd because reading what has been written about him, I suspect that he really wanted to end the schism. And he really thought that he was the legitimate pope. And he really thought that he could fix things. He did not kill anybody. He did not steal more than the next guy. He put all the wealth of the church in the hands of the Medici. So it was very well invested. He was very much a man of the world. Much more than a clergyman. He was no saint. Okay. But he really believed that he was the man that was going to end the schism and set the church straight. And at least from what I have read, he probably had the right intentions.
So which line of popes does the Catholic Church acknowledge or recognize as which line of popes
Pisa.
does the Catholic Church acknowledge or recognize?
The church believes that the centerpiece, the Roman
Oh, okay.
Obedience, was the legitimate.
Okay.
John the 23rd came from Pisa, from the Pisan obedience. So he was supported by France, England, Prussia, Bohemia, Portugal, Florence, and Venice. He had a lot of support. Well, he had to move out of Pisa. He was in Bologna, Rome, and Florence, particularly in Florence. If you catch that series, The Medici, on I think on
Netflix.
Netflix,
It's on Netflix.
yeah, he shows up. Bartolomeo John the 23rd shows up in Baldassare Costa shows up in that show. So with the support of the king, Baldassare Costa, John the 23rd, called for a council in Constance. Constance is in modern Germany, over which he presided. And he thought that the council would say, John the 23rd, you are the legitimate pope. We support you. But no, it didn't happen that way. The council said, the three of you guys are out. You are all three of them, you are deposed. Of course, the guy in Peñíscola out there in Spain, nobody was paying any attention to him. So it was just the Roman Pope that mattered. The Romans said, fine, I'll resign. Enough of this. We've had enough schism. I'll resign. If it's for the benefit of the church, I'll resign. Before that, I'll call the council. That way the council has been called by a pope, and it is legitimate. I'll do that, and then I'll resign. And then you get rid of Baldassare Costa, John the 23rd. John the 23rd saw the axe coming, and he hightailed into Germany when he realized that the council was not going to confirm him. He felt betrayed. But then that's the way the ball bounces. He was arrested, accused of numerous crimes, tried before the council, convicted, and jailed. He was lucky that he was not killed. Because they accused him of everything. They threw the book at him. Eventually, he made peace with the Pope. He was appointed Bishop of Frascati, which is just outside Rome, where they make delicious white wine. And he is buried right here in the baptistry in Florence on a fantastic tomb, a Renaissance tomb. That's the history of Pope John the 23rd. Now, the council in Constance, John the 23rd was deposed, Benedict was ignored, and Gregory agreed to resign. But Martin V was elected as the one legitimate pope. The council came up with decrees or documents, Haec Sancta, this holy church, establishing the authority of ecumenical councils over the pope, and frequents calling for more frequent councils. This was a major blow to the papacy. Council said this group of bishops has power over the pope. That was a major, major defeat. Why the Great Western Schism? We're coming to this item in a second. There was too much French influence on the papacy. The papacy was considered really a tool of the Kingdom of France. The papacy had lost prestige for all those years in Avignon. The European kingdoms scored political points over each other. In other words, it was a question of power. The Council of Constance, as it was called by John 23rd, was illicit because John the 23rd was an anti-pope. An anti-pope cannot call a council. Nevertheless, the delegates voted not as individuals, but by national blocs. It's just unusual. Italians voted together, the French voted together, the Spanish voted together, the Germans voted together, the Dutch probably voted together too, which was unusual. More unusual was that the delegates included churchmen and laymen. Many irregularities. The decrees were never endorsed by the Pope. John Huss and Jerome of Prague showed up before the council, and they were burned at the stake for being heretics. They certainly felt the heat. But it did terminate the Great Western Schism, the Council of Constance. We come to conciliarism, which was the next crisis that the papacy had to face. You thought that this was bad with all the popes and anti-popes. What's the test of power between the cardinals, court, and the majesty, the sovereign, the pope. Imagine a king in which his court has more power than he does. Totally unacceptable. No king would put up with that. Can you ever think of a king that even faced that situation? That would be cause for extermination, wouldn't it? Treason? Yeah. Well, this was ecclesiastical treason. And this was a document from the Council of Constance. The assembled priests and bishops and archbishops and cardinals representing the Catholic Church militant has power even of everyone of whatever state or dignity, even papal, is bound to obey it in these matters. So the council made it very clear. The ecumenical council has power over the papacy. All right, so the Pope says, well, you guys have fun down there today. Let's see what you can come up with. And he planned his reaction. He strengthened the financial position of the papacy. He restored most of its territories and holdings because they were up in the air. He adjourned the council, said to the bishops and cardinals and archbishops, thank you for coming. Thank you for your edicts. Go home now. Take care of business. It was no fun for all those bishops and archbishops to travel that far and to stay in Constance or anywhere else. They would have to stay at moving houses. They would have to stay in small rooms. Food was not abundant. These were people that were used to being like dukes. They were used to living high in the hall. So it really mattered to them how long a council lasts for the degree of inconvenience. Well, Pope Martin prohibited appealing of acts of a pope to a general council. That was a pretty smart move. Well, if I decide something, you cannot take me to a general council. Turn it around. And he also made peace with Joanna of Naples and returned to Rome. In other words, he took things the quieted way. He said, sure, you have made these announcements. We'll deal with them as they come along. In the years that followed, there was poor attendance to the councils of Pavia and Siena due to the plague. Then the next council was supposed to be in Basel, in Germany. Civil unrest forced the Pope to leave Rome for Florence. But the Council of Basel decreed the end of annual papal taxes and limited again the powers of the papacy. One of the things that they did was declare circumcision a mortal sin. Don't ask me. No idea, but it's in the history books. None of these decrees were ratified by the Pope. So all the decrees that the councils had made had to be ratified by the Pope. The Pope very quietly put them aside, just like a pocket veto. Yes, but no thank you. And life went on. So conciliarism was weak, was strong, but the papacy was weak in the 15th century. Basil proclaimed the superiority of the council over the Pope and even prescribed an oath to be taken by the Pope.
Did the Pope still control the money?
Did the popes?
Did the Pope still control the money through the Medici family?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he had the purse.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. And it kept growing and growing and growing. So they made good investments.
So that's the little bit what's making it confusing to me. Conciliary is strong, papacy is weak,
Right.
but the papacy had money.
The final power, yeah.
Many times.
As far as the church was concerned, the emphasis was on conciliaries. The councils can straighten things out if there is a problem. As far as the papacy is concerned, we have the final word. But he never exercised the final word in public. It was all very, very subtly in private. So the Pope tried to dissolve the Council of Basel, but Basel issued him an ultimatum, and he backed down very wisely. So there was a lot of give and take. The council was transferred because of the plague to Prague, and then to Rome, and then to Ferrara first, and then to Florence. Some bishops stayed in Basel. They excommunicated each other. There were more depositions. There was another anti-pope. But by this time, everybody was tired of popes and anti-popes, and it came to nothing. So by sheer exhaustion, conciliarism was finished. The Pope transferred to the council to Florence eventually, and by that time Constantinople was being threatened by the Turks and needed military assistance. So the Pope, with a council going on in Florence, sent a fleet of ships to Constantinople to fetch the emperor, the patriarch, and several hundred clerics, and brought them to Florence. This is not emphasized in the history books. This was a major, major achievement. This is not what they intended to do, but what happened was that these people who came from Constantinople brought enormous amounts of culture, art, history, all in Greek. They brought that to Florence at the time that the Renaissance was flourishing. So this was a key factor in the development of the Renaissance. The group in Florence agreed with the Eastern Church. Once again, they agreed to agree, recognized the primacy of the Pope, the existence of purgatory, other things, but it was never accepted by the faithful. When it was taken back east, the people said, no, we do not want to agree to the stipulations of the Latin Church. We'll talk a little bit about the French Church, and then we'll quit for the day. The French had their own relationship with the Catholic Church. The Pragmatic Sanction of Bourges had been issued by the King of France in 1438. It called for a general council of the church. Ecclesiastical officers were to be elected, not appointed by the Pope. It prohibited the Pope from profiting from benefit, that is, appointments, and forbade appeals to Rome from places further than 2 days' travel. No city would be placed on interdict unless the whole city was culpable. So the Pragmatic Sanction of Bourges really put major limitations on the power of the popes. The French church declared independence from the Church of Rome. Payments of yearly dues were forbidden. Also, intervention of the Pope in the appointment of French bishops and archbishops. Finally, the King of France affirmed the right of the state to interfere in the internal affairs of the church. Of course, this was never accepted by the papacy, but still you can see an effort of the Kingdom of France to set down the rules over control of the church. Eventually, the Concordat of Bologna was held and they smoothed things out. This is a summary. Council of Pisa was a disaster that named 3 popes. The Council of Constance finished the Great Western Schism. The Council of Florence was inconclusive. Conciliarism was cumbersome and did not result in the necessary reforms. The East-West Agreement enhanced the stature of the papacy, but ended up being rejected by the faithful and the clergy of the Eastern Church. The key thing, and this is going to be the last thought in this frame, is that the Pope was back in Rome. The Pope had been humiliated by the years at Avignon. They had been humbled by the Great Western Schism. They had barely survived conciliarism, but conciliarism was now in the way. They returned to Rome and they had to assert their power and their primacy. What did they do? They built. They built and they built. So this is what happened to Rome. Rome was built largely by the Renaissance popes. This is why you go to Rome and you see the papal coat of arms on many, many buildings here and there and everywhere. Even the embassy of Brazil has the coat in Piazza Navona has the papal coat of arms there. So that's what they did. They went back to Rome, and with this building frenzy, the Renaissance came. Right on time. All right, this is where we start next week.